steady, roll.
No country has ever prospered that failed to put its own interests first. Both our friends and our enemies put their countries above ours. And we, while being fair to them, must start doing the same. We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism. The nation state remains the true foundation for happiness and harmony. I am skeptical of international unions that tie us up and bring America down.
Hello and welcome to Right Now, the official podcast of New Right Network. I'm your host, War with the Fanboys, and with me today is Adam Gingrich, president of the MAGA Coalition. Adam, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, no problem, man.
Fantastic. Adam, can you tell me what it is exactly you do at the MAGA Coalition and what is your sort of mission statement with the MAGA Coalition?
Yeah, the MAGA Coalition was kind of the puppy at the door that I rescued last year. It was an idea that was floated up by some people in order to get involved in some key races, but not only that, but the tax reform issues that were struggling early on at some point in the late summer last year. So anyway, some people who didn't know what the hell they were doing wanted to start this thing up. So I threw my hat in the ring to somebody that at that point I trusted. Big mistake. But anyway, this big mistake has turned into be something pretty good. We fixed it. Some of your listeners will remember the interview, the AMA with Glenn Herman. He is the unlikely and non-traditional vice president that was brought in to clean up a lot of the problems we had with the people that founded the super PAC. Which the coalition's a super PAC, but people hear super PAC and they're thinking, lots of money. It's not always that case. Sometimes it's 10 to 100,000, sometimes 200,000. Certainly nothing like Tommy Hicks and what they have going in the American First, where they're dealing with 27, 30 million at a time. So anyway, I've been in government, good Lord, for a long time, longer than I care to admit. So wanted to do something on the heels of working on the Trump campaign. And I got sucked into this world of social media, which I avoided like the plague for many, many years because it was nothing but bad news for politics as I had learned it. And Trump changed all that. So, here we are almost 2 years later of my social media presence. And I'm a year into this, super PAC work, which is pretty interesting. You get to deal with people all around the country, but you want to apply a strict litmus test to make sure that they are pro-Trump, pro-MAGA. You just kind of weed out any of the in-betweeners, the types that ride the fences so they have splinters in their asses. We kind of wanted to do that through the primary process, and we did to some extent with certain success and certain failure. But it's been a fun ride, man. And most of what we do is research, and basically we have to bow to the altar of the Federal Election Commission at all times. And it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of making sure you're not misappropriating any money at all. And of course, we've never done that. We don't pay ourselves. Everybody who's on the board works for free. And so we kind of took a different approach to it with varying degrees of success.
All right, that's really fascinating. And despite the large amounts of paperwork I assume you're subjected to, at least this is, would you agree that this is the most fun time to ever be involved in politics?
Oh, well, that you can take me as an authority on, because I've been doing this for a real long time, over 20 years. And I can tell you that I've experienced nothing like it. I basically got involved with the campaign through traditional victory terms through the RNC. I've been doing presidential campaigns basically since Bush 04, but I really got ramped up for the devil himself, McCain, in 08. That's when I took over a large portion of central Pennsylvania, ran that campaign for McCain, and then did a little bit lesser extent for Mitt Romney. And then with Trump, it was, of course, a different animal altogether. I went through the traditional route, and they kind of put me in a corner because previously I had been with the state committee. I had been with, I ran House races. I took over the Pennsylvania Senate campaign committee for a while. So I really didn't check the box of a guy who was coming in to work on a campaign. Usually they're younger people. They come in and they work for shitty money and they just burn themselves, candles on both ends, that type of thing. So they didn't really know what to do with me, but I came in and worked with the existing chairman, who I was kind of working to get out of the PA chairman. So it was kind of awkward, but it really took only a couple of months before RNC money flows through the state GOP in order to work campaigns. So it took me less than 2 months to realize what they were doing. Much like Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin, it certainly became apparent to me that they were putting all their money, the RNC resources, into the Senate races and kind of subjecting total failure to the Trump effort. So once I got wind of some of these advertisements that were given to me, which was don't let, Pat Toomey was basically saying, his opponent, don't let his opponent become a blank check for Hillary Clinton. So I got these pipelined to me in August. And I saw, well before Access Hollywood tapes were released, that they had already given up in PA. So I split off from the RNC, went with the Trump campaign. That's where I ran into Jack Posobiec. The rest is kind of freaking history. It was tough because it was an unpaid position, but it was well worth it working on the Trump team.
Well, we definitely appreciate your help because, as we all know, Trump did take Pennsylvania the first time that a Republican has won the state in 28 years. So how much credit do you take for that?
Not a whole lot, but I will tell you one thing. Going back to 1988, when we won, I was a wee lad and I wasn't really involved in politics, but I definitely worked with some people on this campaign that hadn't really seen Roger Stone in Pennsylvania since 1988. And it was interesting because I got a chance to work in a corollary fashion with some of the stuff Roger was doing. So the mainstream stuff was done on Dave Urban, but the stuff that was done off the books, so to speak, where you run into a guy like Jack Posobiec, like I did, was Roger Stone operations. And that was centered in Philadelphia, and it really wasn't easy, and it was really awkward. It's not my personality type anymore to go down to the union wards in Philly and deal with all that stuff. But that's what we did, and that's what we had to do. And in the end, it wasn't voter suppression, which was they were trying to call it voter suppression. What it was is voter clarification. Who's voting, why, when, who's being told how to do what, how they electioneering inside the polling places. What we did was, put a blanket of attention around the Philadelphia wards that got picked up by Drudge by noon. So what that did was it drastically reduced the turnout in the Philadelphia wards right around, dinner rush 4 to 5 to 6. And that's a point where I knew that we had the shot. I've been doing this a long time, several presidential, statewide, Senate, all kinds of shit. So I kind of knew that we were in the running for Pennsylvania earlier than most people.
Well, I know it took me by surprise. And again, I'm just so thankful, so proud of my state, and thankful for the work you did. But what do you see for Pennsylvania in the upcoming midterm elections?
Well, as you know, we got screwed. The Supreme Court is loaded up now with Democrats because we had a hapless, hopeless chairman that kind of, withered off the vine in Chairman Gleason in PA, and we lost all kinds of statewide races and judiciary across the board. So we ended up with these Democrats, and they took up the mantle of redistricting 7 years into effect from the last redistricting. It's almost unheard of. It's ridiculous. I shrugged it off when I learned the lawsuit was being resubmitted and refiled. And I'm thinking there's no way in hell this can happen. But against all odds and against the Constitution itself, the state Supreme Court went ahead and said that the 2010 redistricting was done, in unconstitutional terms, and they upheld the challenge by the Democrats, which threw everything in a state of flux. So you had guys in Congress running for Congress that literally had 3 weeks to decide if they wanted to run in a new district, if their district was outside of where they live now. The whole thing just threw everything in flux. And we had a bunch of incumbents that just basically said, screw it. We had Charlie Dent, who was one of the notorious Main Street guys that were up there, middle of the road moderates. And we butted heads because Charlie and I are really old friends. And he was just so vitriolic towards the president that eventually got to the point where he knew he couldn't run. Right? I mean, he knew he wasn't going to be able to run. So I did a rally in his district, but I had already been informed that he wasn't going to run. It was part of the reason I agreed to do that. But it was a pretty successful venture. It was done with the Shafley Group out of St. Louis, and it made headlines nationally. Breitbart picked it up, and then Charlie Dent got really, really, really pissed off at me. But he was the first one out, and then his neighboring district, Costello, another friend of mine, worked really hard to get him in, but he decided he was leaving after a term. And so now we have these open seats that are just going to be a slugfest. Fitzpatrick in Bucks County, as you know, his brother served before him. We didn't want him, but his brother pulled the strings to get him in. He's weak. So that alone is a problem, the vacancies. But the redistricting has just thrown everything in flux. So we have a real shot to lose 5 seats in Pennsylvania alone. And that's a wake-up call for a lot of people. But a lot of people are sleeping. So it should be a wake-up call for a lot more freaking people. But they don't understand. It's really hard to get the word out. And it's like these overarching themes of ridiculous conspiracy are overtaking the actual fundamental aspects of government engineering. And right now we are getting screwed very strategically by Obama and Eric Holder, who have made a national effort out of challenging these redistricting issues on the merit of gerrymandering. And they've been somewhat successful at the state level. So the Supreme Court fucked us over, said, we're not going to bail you out. And it was a ridiculous usurpation by the state Supreme Court. One, I think they should be removed. We have constitutional majorities in both chambers in PA. We could actually impeach these sons of bitches, but nobody's got the balls to do that. That seems to be the overarching theme here. Is nobody's got the balls except for the guy who's living in 1600 Pennsylvania Ave.
Ain't that the damn truth? But you are certainly right that redistricting did hurt us, and it's a shame. And saying that people are sleeping, really, it's really discouraging. I do hope that we can do something. Adam, if you
Sorry about that.
No problem. If you have contact anybody that you are supporting for any of these state races or any of the congressional seats, please put them in contact with me. I'll get them on the show here. Try to get them some exposure because, again, I'm from Pennsylvania. I want to make Pennsylvania great again, and I want to keep it red as long as possible.
Yeah, you might have to do that in a couple of these seats, particularly the districts that were swapped around. A lot of people are looking at the Connor Lamb, Rick Saccone race, and there's a lot of ins and outs. I mean, you and I could talk forever because you know the PA dynamics, but a lot of people don't. But now Keith Rosfus has got a new district. He's an incumbent that had a safe district that is redrawn, and now Connor Lamb has to run in his district. So essentially, you've got 2 incumbents running against each other. It's not getting a lot of play. I'm telling you, it's very concerning to me. So a lot of our attention right now as a PAC has been in focus on what we're going to do in mid-October to the finish line in California, because that is where we're going to hold the hill or die, because we've got to hold the San Fernando, San Diego. There's a lot of seats out there that people just think they just look at in a like a macro fashion that California doesn't matter. Well, I got news for you, man. As far as holding on to a congressional majority, no state matters more than California.
Good to know. I think you're right. A lot of people tend to write off California as just a liberal wasteland, but we've spoken to a lot of great candidates from California in the past few months, and hopefully we can see. You're right. Holding a congressional majority is got to be our prime focus right now, and I'm glad that we've got people like you working for us, and hopefully we can get the voters out there. Now, when you first started introducing yourself, you talked about you said, quote, a big mistake. What was that? What was that mistake, Adam?
Well, the big mistake is actually what we picked up, and it was kind of like a barely germinated seed in a super PAC idea that was meant to benefit certain people financially, and I looked at it in the opposite fashion. I wanted to make it benefit certain components of Trump-esque, Trump-style candidacies across the country. And frankly, I know the big guns. You know, I know the big guns in most of the big states that were involved in the campaign. It was a chance to kind of do something important. And we had the ear of, it was my decision with my pitch, actually, that if you want to be serious, you got to get out there and get on Fox News and reach a lot of people. And we talked about, Dr. Sebastian Gorka was just, escorted politely out of the White House right around the time Bannon did. And I had been told for quite some time and told my listeners and followers that Gorka never did receive his security clearance. He was kind of ostracized, and he really was not appreciated by many members of the national security team. And matter of fact, he was just kind of vilified by McMaster, who said he had no business being there, and they didn't want him to be around the president without anybody else being there with him. So, but the advantage to like a Gorka was like on every freaking television show that Fox was producing. So we picked him up for an exorbitant sum, and that sell was, hey, get this guy out there. He's reaching 10 million eyeballs a week. So that's how we get the cause out. That's how we get the president's message out. Gorka was the only one getting paid out of the whole operation. So we wanted to make sure that we, if we were going to drive a Bentley, we were going to live in a trailer. That's what I used to say. And that's how I had guys like Brian Hassine out there in California, independently wealthy, certainly didn't want to take any money. And then, of course, Glenn Herman, who is, he's just an interesting character that you all got to meet. And if you haven't listened to that, fantastic. I believe you interviewed him, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so you won't forget that anytime soon. So, bringing a guy like that on with his, security clearance issue, I don't have to worry about trusting him. His, executive status at IBM and other large software companies help come in and do the paperwork issue aspect of this whole thing, which was a total disaster, which all draws back to this Ann Vandersteel, her husband, and it was just a total shit show. The guy that was funding that, Your Voice America, and they had all kinds of ideas about building a studio, and it was just but I learned very quickly that they weren't serious people, that they just wanted money. And the time that I kind of told them that there's not going to be any money there to take personally, then they were all out. They wanted out. They wanted nothing to do with it. So I'm kind of standing there with this pack with my name on it that I was vice president of or whatever, or president, and my vice president set it up, and he set it up in a completely erroneous way that was barely legal. So I had a choice, man, walk away and get away, from this whole thing, or let's make it something. And I chose to make it something. I'll probably live to regret that. I have a couple times already. But it was a kind of a thing that we wanted to do, as far as certainly not to enrich any candidate or enrich ourselves, but to be a pass-through of a message. And everything was working out just fine until gentleman Roy Moore kind of blew up. And that was where we were assaulted heavily in the cradle, if you will. If not killed in infancy, we were kind of assaulted in the cradle because of our involvement in the Roy Moore race.
Very, very fascinating. Glenn, I certainly do remember Glenn. He was one of my favorite individuals to interview, I think. And you know what, Adam, I want to see Glenn in Congress. Can you do that for me?
No, that would be an impossibility. Matter of fact, it would have to be a post-apocalyptic world, and then he would, of course, not be elected to anything. He would merely murder who he had to murder to become, in charge. So. A personality like Glenn cannot be in any way throttled, modified, mitigated. It is an unbridled thing. It is a sometimes human, sometimes alien conflation. It's just, Glenn is Glenn. I mean, he, as you know, is simultaneously introspective and also some of the most vitriol, anguish can be articulated by him in a way that most people just not only couldn't do, but have a hard time listening to it, because it's almost like a auditory assault on people that are not used to that. So, Glenn is Glenn. We've had a good time with this whole thing. He certainly has his level of frustration with it, as do I. But if anything, he has kept me from taking this too seriously. I take Trump very seriously. I take the fact that we only got one shot at this, one bite at the apple, and I'm very serious about that. But not to take myself too seriously, not to take the pack too seriously, as opposed to like if somebody attacks the pack, don't take it personally. It's just business. And one thing that Glenn has been dealing with for a long time is the fact that you create your own world online. And that's what it was, basically that's back to Prodigy, the stuff he was working with. All this stuff is it's not really an existential issue. I mean, Twitter is not real. And if you think you're a big shit because you have 300,000 followers, no one recognizes you when you go to the grocery store. Trust me, no one cares. No one cares. And you've got to get your head around that. You've got to really get your head around it. You will never be Twitter famous. The only way anybody's Twitter famous, they're already famous. If they're James Woods, if they're Roseanne Barr, great. You're going to get a ton of retweets. They recognize you at the grocery store because of who you are. But there is no one I know that's Twitter famous. There are a few guys that get confused about it, like Mike Cernovich and Bill Mitchell, not to equate the two of them, but these two guys think that people actually know who they are when they go to, pick up a six pack or, whatever, go to the grocery store. And it's just frankly not true. Nobody knows who you are.
Sure, I definitely follow your train of thought on that. But I do want to ask you, what are your thoughts on Mike Cernovich? He is a very divisive figure, it seems like. People either love him or hate him. I want to know, what are your thoughts?
Hey, I know Mike, and I've been saying this. I actually said it earlier in a rare Periscope today. It's time that we kind of tell the story without writing a book and asking people to pay for it. As a component of the election, this interesting notion that the Russians or like a Macedonian bot factory were putting out the fake news and the false stories. No, that's not necessarily true. It was being facilitated, fostered, cultivated, and a group of people that were internet savvy, and I was kind of on the outer edges of that because I really was new to social media. But I know who these people are, and they were associated in large part with finding an account that could get it out to a larger fact. So before we get to Q, but this part of the process started during the election that made whatever happened with this whole Q phenomenon possible. It was an alt-right version at that point. And Mike Cernovich had the largest platform at that point. And so I would DM Mike, and I'm sure other people from the campaign would DM Mike. And I'll admit this, I don't care if, Robert Mueller wants to call me up. It had nothing to do with the Russians, it had nothing to do with WikiLeaks. It was like these finely tuned medical profiles on Hillary's health or things of that nature. Or email speculations of the NYPD conflicts with the FBI over what's going on. Mike was a very effective messenger through Periscope. Matter of fact, before Periscope really could handle it, the bandwidth couldn't even hold him. I mean, he was crashing Periscope regularly from September on through the election. So Mike had proved himself useful. Now he is prone to dramatics, histrionics. What I learned from Mike is a barely functional knowledge of how government really works. But again, when it came down to strategic application of beneficial news to Trump, detrimental to Hillary, Mike was one of the best. Now, over the Syrian conflict, the McMaster rumor about sending over 150,000 troops to Syria and people jumping on and off the train like who is it? Paul Joseph Watson and who's the guy from Canada, Molyneux. Everybody lit themselves on fire like some kind of freaking Buddhist monk. And it was really kind of ridiculous because we're talking about less than 60 old Tomahawk missiles that hit nothing but empty fields. And that was a flare-up. And then it got a little bit worse because I knew from my connections in D.C. that Mike was part of a chain of leaks that were coming from the NSC through Bannon's connections. And I got really irritated about this, and it was a little bit back and forth through me on Periscope. He blocked me. He had a White House pass, and he was bragging that he was going to the White House, and he had a White House pass for the credential for the briefing, and I made a phone call and had it revoked. And that obviously was something that didn't go over very well. So, but we're past all that, I think. It's just, like, I've been in the room with Mike a lot. I've been into the events that he and Jeff Geese have set up together. But I don't I don't converse with him. I don't know if he knows who I am by my face or not. I really don't care. I'm not that kind of guy. I really don't care. It's not real. I mean, Mike Cernovich is not real because it's just a Twitter thing. So, but I think he does serve a pretty effective purpose. You saw what happened with the, calling out that James Gunn character. He's still effective now in chasing out the double standard on Twitter, but he's doing it in a way where he's respecting the fact that you can't take Twitter down and live to tell your story anymore. And that's where you start to find your difference between Microchip and others that have been exiled from Twitter, who are looking to basically blow it all up at all costs because they're not allowed to be involved anymore. Mike seems to have a pretty keen eye for the fact that he would have very little income coming in if he didn't keep his Twitter profile at the status that it is. So I'll give him credit for that. That being said, I am still blocked on Periscope.
All right. I guess Mike wouldn't want to bite the hand that feeds him in regards to Twitter. Now, I do want to get to some questions from our audience, but I want to ask you one more. One of the bigger news items, in my opinion, this week was the firing of Peter Strzok. What do you make of that and of the whole FBI sort of unbiasedness that they were and still continue to exhibit?
Listen, the whole thing's absurd. And it started with McCabe, trying to discipline McCabe, walk the fine line, keep him around, because as you know, the Horowitz investigation is predicated on the fact that you are still an active employee of the FBI or the Department of Justice. Once you're outside of that, he has no legal capability of even talking to you. So for quite some time now, a very long time, I've been cautioning people, don't worry about McCabe still being there. He is just basically under lock and key, under their thumb, because they can continue to go back to him for as many interviews as they need to through the Horowitz investigation in order to ascertain the material they want. And if he starts saying he can't plead the fifth into the IG, okay? So you can have counsel there, but you can't not answer their question because that lack of candor. And that is the phrase that was associated with his dismissal. You have to understand, the FBI every year, on average, between 19 and 21 people, agents and otherwise, are dismissed from the FBI due to a similar investigation and lack of candor. They have, depending on your security clearance and your activities that you're involved in, you have to go through these polygraphs, which, as we learned, Peter Strzok put off these polygraphs, and he was not in service. On some of these, he was out of time on some of these polygraphs, and he put it off. And then when he did take it, there was a red flag. And then that all was separate from, Horowitz finding the text messages on the FBI devices with Lisa Page. So the FBI never entertained getting the Gmail between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok or Andrew McCabe or anybody else like that. So there's a whole shit show that the FBI refuses to get into, including Horowitz. So this idea that you got to trust Chris Wray is kind of absurd because Chris Wray did not want Peter Strzok to be fired. So Chris Wray kind of puts his feet in the sand, digs his heels in and says, yeah, I'm not firing him. The Office of Personnel Management says he gets 60 days suspended and a demotion. Well, how many times can we demote this motherfucker? So the deputy director of the FBI has to fire Peter Strzok because otherwise there's going to be hell to pay. With the White House. So it's kind of a sad state of affairs. The FBI guys that I know that are around here that don't get involved in the intrigue, to have a beer with them, a couple of them that I know that live in Hershey, work in the mid-state, they don't get into the political part of this whole thing, but they are kind of disgusted because Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Andrew McCabe, these are the worst of the worst examples, bureaucratically speaking. These are the guys that just suck. To them, it makes them harder to feel good about the job that they do every day to protect Americans. They don't want to protect them. They absolutely loathe Peter Strzok. And the fact that Christopher Wray refused to have the balls to fire him himself tells you all you really need to know about Christopher Wray.
All right, thank you. I've got a great question from RSAsh 1980 here, and you sort of brought this up earlier. He wants to know who started the QAnon deal, and can it be proven?
I think it will be proven if Jack Posobiec is going to put up what I think will be some pretty convincing evidence. But I talked about this earlier today. I'll talk about it again. It's you can't disprove a negative. It's really hard to prove something that doesn't exist and disprove it. It just doesn't work that way. But when you have Discord chats and some logins and trip codes and things of that nature, and you find out that there were a couple of people that were involved at this stage, and then there were a couple of more people that were involved, I think you're going to know at least 4 to 5 names based on Jack's report that's coming out, I think, next week. And I'm certainly not going to scoop him. I mean, I think people get frustrated because they want to know names and they want to know now. And I understand that. Believe me, no one wants to give euthanasia to the Q movement more than I do. But Jack is something he's been working on for quite some time. And I think this is kind of a redemption mission for somebody who's been involved at the get-go. And that's a young man named James Brower. James Brower, somebody I just happen to know through the Cernovich, Chuck Johnson, researcher, deplorable type of circle thing. And I knew him from a couple other Bull Moose Party events or whatever. He's not the most stable young man that you're ever going to come across. And he really didn't have a remarkable role in the campaign up in like Rhode Island or something, where he was just running a phone bank and fetching coffee. But he did fancy himself to be, quite the inside knowledge guy, and claimed to have some friends inside the Ryan Zinke Interior Department that he clearly used to fabricate some stuff. And that's one part of it. And then, of course, we know that Tracy Beans Diaz was working in conjunction with these people that started it to grow their YouTube accounts. And then, like, collectively, it was like an Amway thing. It's really like a pyramid scheme. And they figured they would target some YouTube audiences that they could get out the message to, and then work its way, out from there. The real funny part is Microchip, because Microchip is the original bot farmer. I mean, Microchip, the things he did during the campaign infuriated the shit out of everybody, except for those that enjoyed it for a 2-month period that was beneficial to Trump. But, Microchip's the kind of guy you got to watch. I think Bob Mueller would want to talk to Microchip. I mean, Microchip has manipulated, massaged, and abused the Twitter algorithms to the extent where it's almost impressive. And clearly he either jumped in right after or soon thereafter in a almost in a double agent sort of way to use Q for his own purposes. So we know Microchip is going to be implicated. He will not out himself. He will not dox himself, and he may use his own levers that he has. And I believe he does have his own logs. But I think somebody texted me that Q just dropped something about we have logs, we have ham transactions or whatever. I mean, it's just, where are we at now, man? Where Q is now in a self-defense mode to saying, almost like an AI robot, don't kill me, I'm real. I have keystroke logs too, and trip codes and ham transaction. I mean, really? I mean, isn't the point of a ham radio? It's pretty hard to isolate out and record the fucking thing. I mean, the absurdity is reached a crescendo. So at its apex, it must go nowhere but down. I mean, we are quickly reaching that. So without knowing exactly what Posobiec is going to report, I know Jack well enough for 2 years now that Jack would not do this, would not take this gamble unless he had definitive proof of what was going on with Q.
Wow, that sounds so exciting. I cannot wait for everybody to shut up about Q. I think it makes Trump supporters look stupid. I think it makes us look like conspiracy theorists. And if someone can finally put it to bed, I will be very thankful for that.
Yeah, you and me both.
Now, you mentioned about manipulating Twitter algorithms, which is something we know that Twitter is constantly tweaking and constantly altering, a lot of times in a way that is not beneficial to conservatives. Jake Highwell asked, do you think the president will do anything to stop the rampant social media censorship before the midterms?
No, and there's not really a lot he can do. And I think if people want to take a snapshot in time of the, weighing the whole, what can we do to, rectify the whole Alex Jones getting wiped off in an Orwellian fashion and becoming an unperson, and having Muslim terrorist sites that are still up and active. I mean, what can we do to find that First Amendment space in between? Look no further than the fact that the original talking point today, as of this afternoon, when it was reported that on July 26th, the president revoked John Brennan, former CIA director John Brennan, former communist John Brennan, perjurer John Brennan, revoked his security clearance to, officially in the press conference, it was revoked July 26th, but, none of the reporters were smart enough to actually look at that. And it's kind of puzzling that anyone would think that we could do too much from a presidential idea, because they're saying it's a First Amendment issue. That blows my mind. They're saying that taking away security clearance from a talking head on CNN who's been, spouting off about shit he shouldn't be talking about is a First Amendment issue. If the highest security clearance in the land is a First Amendment issue, then what the fuck is left, man? It doesn't make any sense. It's completely antithetical. It's anti-intellectual. It's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. So you got to look at what they're doing. They're framing it that way for a reason. So there's not really a whole lot we can do, not through the FCC and certainly not through any other action taken by the administration unilaterally. I would love to tell you that, but it's really not going to happen other than through various mechanisms of litigation, which take a very long time. And then you start driving, you're looking to drive down the value of the stock on a publicly traded form. And you look at Facebook and, we run into issues where Facebook will drop 19%, but then it's a cheap buy, right? So people buy back in really fast because that's the nature of the market right now. And I really don't think you're going to find a way to get Jack Dorsey to do anything more than just kind of, massage your metaphorical balls with wordplay.
Sure. Now, do you think that Jack and Mark Zuckerberg and these folks, are they involved at any level with the so-called deep state?
Well, traditionally, if you want to break out the matrix of what the deep state really is, well, then, of course, the tech industry has been there since the development of the military-industrial complex on. Since the first mainframe was really built, and you want to go back to the original IBM stuff in the 60s. So, without going into an unnecessary, history lesson here, yes, the short answer is yes, but they do so in a way that is, like I said before, they do these conferences, they do these other confabs where they just sit around and they come up with these loose constructs of how they want to start I believe Jack Dorsey said, the healthy conversation or whatever. That is just a euphemism for, shutting out the free speech of those that you don't want to hear. And 10 years ago, I wasn't as concerned about this with the social media development as I am now, because I'm watching what's happening in Europe. And if you're watching what's happening in Europe, particularly in the UK, you're becoming increasingly concerned that we could be in some way being led to this type of eventuality. And it's frankly unthinkable. It's really hideously unthinkable what's going on over there. And we can't have that here. So again, it's the balance of things. But you have to understand the nature of the beast. If Trump didn't have Twitter, I can tell you there would not be a President Trump. So it's, it's the host and the parasitic, quality of it. Whereas if we kill the host, we die too, right? As much as Gab has and I'm kind of a little bit unnerved with this consortium of microchip and the Ricky Vaughns and the Jared Wines who are exiled, working with Torba to kind of completely torch Twitter for conservatives so everybody leaves it. And that's that's to me, that's anecdotal, I should say. It's not something that I know for a fact, but it's what I put together on some of the messages that I'm seeing. I think that's a bad idea. It's clearly a bad idea. I think we want to fight it out on Twitter. We don't want to just kind of, because you're just leaving it for the savages. And there's still going to be millions of people out there that will not have alternative voices if we completely discard it. I know it's frustrating, but there's really not a whole lot you can do about it.
It certainly is frustrating. I know a lot of conservatives are frustrated, a lot of Republicans, and even libertarians, but the libertarians sort of are on board with them being able to do it with whatever they want. So it's a very fragile ecosystem, you were describing.
And let me go. That's a great point. the 4chan development is really naturally, it's symptomatic of this libertarian nature, not wanting to go through Twitter in order to disseminate this, Q patriot clearance type of thing. It's a perfect way to conflate the YouTube, Periscope, Gab, the nexus of the whole thing with Twitter is to go off if you're microchip, right? If you want to be involved in something and, you want it to go into, Facebook to the boomers, which they've been successful at fooling a lot of grandma and grandpas who don't know what the hell's going on, that Q is real, and Twitter. But I get the sense with Micro that he planted a real life deadfall trap in there, that it's kind of suckering people towards it, and it's going to fall through, and it's just going to be an attack on Twitter and Facebook. And I'm not necessarily convinced that's the best thing that we can end up with here. But Q, it's kind of, don't you think it's kind of funny that you go into a 4chan, let's migrate to 8chan, and it doesn't really jibe with the fact that it went from what it did in such a short period. 6 months before people start showing up at a Trump rally with the first Q sign. And YouTube channels are getting 200,000 views from people who never heard of these people before, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So there's just something eerie going on with the whole thing. But it's absolutely without dispute that Micro will be proven to be involved in this whole thing.
All right, like I said, definitely looking forward to Jack's report on that. I've got a question here from Paradigm. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, does she help or hurt the Republicans?
Well, thus far, obviously, she's really helping put everything into perspective. She's kind of a moron. I really don't want to subject too much. I really don't want to get into it. I mean, the hyperbole would be out of control if I wanted to break it all down. But she is like like a ballistic missile that just lost its code, bearings, and she's just firing all over the place, and you don't know where she's going to land, and chances are it's not in the area you wanted her to go. So I think it's a healthy distraction for Nancy Pelosi, and whether or not that's the intention, I don't know. I don't want to play 4D chess like everybody feels the need to do, but it certainly has alleviated some of the pressure on, will you or will you not vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker? Because now it's been supplanted with, do you believe that this woman from Brooklyn or Queens or wherever the hell is right about? Are you identifying as a Democrat socialist? So she has provided a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of a buffer zone for Nancy Pelosi. So in that way, she's been beneficial to the leadership of the Democratic Party. But honest to God, the primary numbers are not coming in well for that type of opponent, which kind of sucks for us. The further left you push the Democrats into voting in a primary, the better chance we have to defeat that person in even marginal districts that lean to the Democrats. So I enjoy her. The Cuomo brothers are great too. I don't know if you saw that today. Governor Cuomo saying we're not going to make America great again because it was never great that great to begin with. That type of thing is a gift that keeps on giving. That's being tweeted everywhere. I encourage people to retweet that. And then, of course, yesterday or the day before, when Chris Cuomo used his TV platform to say that don't try to equate Antifa for hitting a fascist with the fascist that's getting hit. So defending Antifa and the Cuomo brothers are really doing a great job for us as well.
Yeah, it really seems like Democrats, a lot of them don't love this country, and they don't want us to succeed. It's a sad state of affairs.
Agreed.
I have a question from Theory. You mentioned about Roseanne on Twitter. She wants to know, was Roseanne ever MAGA?
Well, I mean, if you want to really go back to Roseanne's, Green Party, Third Party, she hated George Bush. She went through like an evolution. She's very much, grown into a libertarian, conspiracy leaning libertarian. But I followed her early on, and she followed back before development started on her project to get back on ABC. And then I just got to know that a lot of people got in a DM that was her son taking over the account for a while. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And she's a really remarkable woman. And if you go back and watch the old shows, the original ABC run, if you go back and look at it, it's about the Trump platform before she even knew what the hell a Trump platform would be. And that is the eradication of the middle class. And you see that a lot of this Ortez type of Bernie Sanders talking points, they center around the fact that there is no more upper middle class, right? They're basically just saying that that doesn't exist anymore. Don't try to implement or achieve something that's gone. Like the manufacturing sector should be gone. We just need to embrace some neoclassical view of the economy and just embrace the retail or service-oriented aspect of the economy and let everything else come into our country from these countries that have 12-year-olds working for 75 cents an hour. But Trump absolutely rebukes all of that. So if you look at theoretical Lanford, Illinois, the Roseanne family, it was a beautiful maturation process into what could have been a really successful venture. The first season back was great. Very disappointed when it was derailed. But clearly, Roseanne, I love her as a comedian, as a writer, as an actor. But there's not, something's not lining up in her personal life right now, and she's a little bit here or there. And frankly, that's why the same thing we endured with Kanye West, I don't want everybody to just feel free to like hitch their wagon to, that horse, because these people don't live like you do. Right? There's no balance in Roseanne Barr or Kanye West's life that is going to reflect the same way on a week-to-week basis. So they're not you. They're not living paycheck to paycheck, and they see the world in a very different way. So I've always cautioned this notion to get into hero worship just because one notorious liberal person decides that they like Donald Trump. And I'm not judging Roseanne or Kanye. I'm just using them as particular examples. Is that if you're going to build somebody up one day, be prepared to have to swallow your words. But I continue to support Roseanne getting back on the form of telling the story that the middle class family has been under assault since Reagan left office, and we need to get it back, and Trump is doing that. So I don't agree with some of the conspiracy laden stuff that she gets into, but hey, I mean, we're not always going to agree on everything, right? So I very much support Roseanne, and I don't know. I know that she is now seeking to make America great again. But I think in Roseanne's mind, having been around as long as she has, flirting with third-party runs for president herself, she knows that in her mind, this is beyond Trump. And I think she's looking for something to validate that this is more than just Trump. And I believe she is MAGA. But will she agree with everything Trump does? Not necessarily.
All right. Very well put, Adam. I had two questions come in at the same time here from Freedom and Coco Mojo 64. They want to know, what are your thoughts and opinions on Omarosa?
I believe I refer to her as a human migraine. She's been doing this for 25 years. She was in the Clinton administration, was bounced around through Al Gore's office and, basically run out of there. And then she rediscovered some type of relevancy on The Apprentice. And it has said nothing but great things about Trump for 15 years now. That said, bringing her in on that level, I mean, director of whatever public relations for the office of liaison or whatever the hell it was. It was a bullshit way to get her to the top executive level pay of like 157. But the problem with that was that that afforded her the opportunity to be in certain meetings with other staff that they didn't want her in there. So it was a graduated shit show from the campaign to the White House. And during the campaign, there's multiple stories about how she was just isolated, frustrated because no one wanted her around. No one wanted to deal with her. And Katrina Pearson, God love her, knowing her personally, one of the sweetest, most honest people you're ever going to know, got sucked up into this whole tape, fiasco because she's saying, trying to quell the conversation and concern to move on that tape, saying okay, let's just assume he said it and he's embarrassed and let's move on. There is no tape. And they certainly would not have risked it being only up 4 points 2 weeks before the election, that they would have just stopped with the original Access Hollywood tape. They would have dropped it. And if they do have that tape, which I sincerely doubt they do, and I doubt the veracity of that tape, they would want to hold on to it for the 2020, of course. They would not drop it for a midterm. So Omarosa definitely kind of screwed up the timeline for everybody. But what I find unique is if you watch her interviews, she's loathed by everybody, right? The Democrats, the liberals that are interviewing her on these liberal networks just cannot stand a sight of her. They don't like her. And, nobody on the right will ever want to talk to her again. So she's kind of a woman without a home. And this is indicative of her entire career. So was it a mistake bringing her in? Yeah, of course it was a mistake. Trump was a reality star on television, which, elevated his status beyond what was the New York Metro reputation as a magnet, a real estate guy. He don't drop him into DC out of nowhere, and he's not going to make a mistake on personnel. I mean, give me a break. Every president makes a mistake on personnel. Trump has made quite a few, and she is just one of them, and it's at a lower level. And she's actually now, from my understanding from people that are on the campaign, again, right now, under Parscale, is the NDA that was signed is a pretty sick, something I never had to sign because I never got high enough into it. But the NDA is ironclad from the campaign level that she signed, and she's violating currently by playing these tapes. And the NDA from the White House, which is, of course, standard, she violated that. And going into the Situation Room and recording the chief of staff in the Situation Room is also a potential federal crime. So she is now being sued for millions for violating the NDA on the civil front from the campaign. And the Department of Justice is working with the White House and the Secret Service into exploring charges against her for violating some security exchange by surreptitiously recording the president and the chief of staff. So she's in a world of hurt. And this is very typical of her. She just tried to, get her pound of flesh so quick that there's no rebuttal. Well, she should know, of all people, Trump will prevail in this sense. So that's all I got on her.
All right. Well, hopefully it has a happy ending, especially with all those lawsuits pending against her. We can certainly hope. I've got a few questions coming in here. One from Obi, another one from Coco Mojo. We did talk about the Pennsylvania elections, but they want to know, what are your thoughts on the red wave in November? Is it going to be a red wave? Is it going to be a blue wave? What are we going to do? What's going to happen?
Yeah, what you're looking to do here, if you're the Republicans, is, you've got percolating water. You want to kind of dissolve that, not dissolve it, but you want to kind of get it, settled. You don't want to wave. You're not looking for a red wave. That's not possible. You have to understand that, if 60 House retirements, we've got 40 Republicans and 20 Democrats. Right away, that's bad news. And then we've got, some seats that have gone from toss up to lean D, or, things of that nature. We are just in a bad spot up against one big 800-pound gorilla, and that is history. I mean, no president typically ever, whether it's the first midterm or the second midterm, holds steady, picks up seats, or loses just a few. I mean, on average, they lose like 20 or more. So it's just a fact. So in 1998, the second midterm for Bill Clinton, the Congress pushed too hard on Newt Gingrich, pushed too hard on the impeachment front, and the wave of sympathy and the Microsoft tech bubble that was going through the market in 98, they actually picked up a couple seats in 98 in a midterm. And then George Bush, post 9/11, the whole country was, together on that, and he picked up a couple seats, just a couple. And those are the only two examples of midterm gains or holding the line since Harry Truman. So the math is against us. So this is my frustration. My frustration is, do I want to be a carnival barker out there on the avenue telling people if we don't do something, the end is nigh? Or do you want to kind of be a cheerleader that just keeps everybody happy and they go out and vote and then they get home on that night in November and they find out that we have lost control of the House by 10 to 15 seats and they're just basically stunned? I mean, there's two ways to look at it. And there are a lot of people on Twitter that know that telling the truth about the realities of it is quick way to lose people's interest. And I just don't care anymore about that, to be honest with you. I'm beyond the point of, you know, I don't need followers. This is not a monetary transaction here. This is a public service transaction where I do my best to give the people what I know in the capacity they will understand, and that is true. And I'm not busy trying to tell people what's going to happen a week from now. I'm more busy trying to tell people what happened today or yesterday or tomorrow and why it happened. That's kind of where I'm at. And it's where I've been since the recount process started, courtesy of Jill Stein, right after the election. So the chances of it being a red wave, you know, God bless Donald Trump, he has to say that, it's almost nil. There's almost nothing you can do. I mean, I just described to you earlier this situation we're here in PA. I can tell you we've got some problems in New Jersey with a couple of seats that we are losing or going to lose probably. And, you know, California's a battle zone. And we've got a couple, you know, Illinois area suburb seats, and in Texas, in Houston, Austin area outside of Dallas, Fort Worth as well, that are problematic. And then, of course, there's always going to be Florida, where it's a toss-up, where we have some people that you can't tell if they're Republican or Democrat, but what they're saying, but, you know, it could flip the registration, you know, of what they're doing over there. Basically, looking at the infusion of Puerto Ricans that are going to be voting in Florida, it's going to be pretty tough. The Democrats are actually slipping a little bit, but they're boosting their numbers with that. I can say that I'm encouraged with statewide races. Very encouraged. I mean, if you look at the Senate map, this is the once in a lifetime shot, man. You know, the D's picked up a couple of seats, you know, 10, well, not 10, but maybe 6 seats they had no business picking up in 2012 because of the Obama, you know, trickle down effect. So it would be an abomination for Tester to be standing after November. It would be an abomination for Heitkamp, Donnelly, Manchin, McCaskill to be standing after this. So, you know, we've got Rick Scott up over Bill Nelson, an incumbent D. So yeah, I'm more interested in, you know, the statewide, because I think we're doing pretty well. I mean, if you look at Ron DeSantis in Florida running for governor, he was down $20 million and 22 points in the polls to Adam Putnam. And after all that time, Trump basically just went down there and held one rally, and he is now up by 17 points, people. DeSantis is up by 17 points. I mean, that is the power of Trump in Florida. I'm convinced that is going to hold a lot of weight in Florida. But the idea of a red wave is really politically nonsense. I think most pollsters will tell you that. What we want is to avoid a blue wave. The fact that 23 seats is all that stands between us and just a nightmare of, you know, Chairman Adam Schiff, Chairman Jerry Nadler, that type of bullshit. You know, I'm very concerned about it. I think that this should be preeminent in our minds. And, you know, I'm sad to say I don't see too many Q drops about getting out there and voting for your congressman. So you got to, you know, how is this helping? I don't understand. It's really, it's just ridiculous. It's going to lead to disappointment, disenchantment, disillusionment. People are going to be like, why is Podesta not arrested? Why is Huma not arrested? Why is Hillary not arrested? Why is John McCain not dead and arrested? I mean, the list goes on and on. Why are there not trials and tribunals and Gitmo? Why is habeas corpus not suspended for the first time since Abraham Lincoln? Why is there no emergency broadcast on my TV telling me there's martial law? I want everybody to pay. I want heads on sticks. I want, you know, all this stuff. Frankly, that's not going to happen, right? Because we're all sane people for the most part. So, Thorazine aside, what are you expecting the result to be in November when we go to the booth? People are not going to be as excited. They're going to be disappointed because they're going to look around, especially these first-time voters. We have like 9 million of them. We had 9 million people, Republicans, come out and just like out of nowhere that didn't vote for Romney or didn't give a shit vote for Trump. And I suspect that a lot of that, a bulk of those 9 million are people that believe in these types of things. And to keep them engaged, it's required to have that type of dialogue. The only problem is it's a soup can dialogue. It's not real. You're not talking into a phone. It's a goddamn Campbell's soup can.
All right, I appreciate the honesty, Adam. Of course, definitely we got to get out there and vote, folks, so that we don't lose any of these seats. We definitely don't want to lose our majority. And it's not going to be Q. It's not going to be any arrests. It's going to be the votes, folks, that make it or break it this election. So please remember, please vote. And we're almost out of time here, Adam. But I got to ask you a question. We've had a few people, Glenn, Ginger McQueen, a couple other people have asked about a guy named Brendan Dilley. Can you give me the scoop on who this guy is and what his deal is?
Well, I like the incredulity that you put in your voice on that one. But the acting career is ahead of you, my friend. No, I think a lot of people know who this goofball is. And I don't understand his style, his tactics. I've largely tried to ignore the guy, but when you try to run for Congress and get in the way of what is the normal course of business out there, that's kind of an irritant to the process. But then I see, and I get, remarkably psychotic clips from this guy. He's just saying the most bizarre things in the world and calling them dilly drops, which of course was, in our minds, a euphemism for shitting in the toilet after your morning coffee. And it was, and that's an insult to the shit that's coming out of your ass after your coffee. So, this guy's dropping the craziest. He's like doubling down on Q with the stuff that just absolutely so unconstitutional, so unrealistic, that I just kind of like worry about. But when you try to take in money, which he did successfully take in almost $50,000 from people, and many people that I knew pretty well, who were convinced that this guy was going to, win a primary for a special election in the 8th district in Arizona, knowing him, and he tries to downplay all this, but of course we know. Ginger knows him. Brian Nassine knows him. We were, on this silly podcast with Bill Mitchell for a long time. And he's really a goofball. And he sits around drinking energy drinks and trying to make fun of people when he thinks he's funny. And he's really not. His laugh is just bizarre. But there's a little story I want to tell. If you don't think he's crazy already, believe me, he's crazy. He got 734 votes, by the way. 734 votes. For almost $50,000, which is really hard to do. I mean, you almost have to be the guy on, Megan's Law's website, or have your picture up on a telephone pole saying this guy raped my cat. I mean, I don't know how you get only 734 votes with $50,000 invested in your campaign. It's really not a good indicator for your likability or your measure of a man. But he eventually came out, and this is the courtesy of a friend of ours, original 33 Rules, tried to be friendly and hang out there in Arizona. And they go to a gun range and, whatever. I guess 33, spent his round, put the magazine out and put the gun facing in a perpendicular direction, which, as we all know, you always want your barrel to be downrange. And later, I guess Dilley was telling people that the MAGA coalition, which, has nothing to do with 33. I mean, he didn't even know what the hell the MAGA coalition was. So the MAGA coalition was trying to kill him. So at this point, you've got to wonder, what's going on with this guy. So there's a lot in his past that we can make public. And really, we're not in the business of, this guy has made incredibly erroneous and felonious libelous statements about the PAC that I run and other things personally about me. And he himself, we're talking about just a chain of bankruptcies. We're talking about spousal abuse, horrible divorces, all on public file. It's really disturbing what this guy is. I mean, he tried to run for Congress, and he told people he was running for Congress that he didn't go to college, and he thinks college is a waste of time and money, and that he will be a better congressman because he never was educated. And it was really odd because he calls himself an author, but then the excerpts of his book are, I mean, you think Gorilla Mindset has issues as far as like being a misogynist. This guy is just a real strange brew when it comes to that stuff. No respect for women at all. And here he starts doing these dilly drops at the same time to try to elevate his numbers in Periscope, which is kind of sad. I mean, the whole thing is just really sad to me. I was on a show that he was on for a long time, but it's in Telegram rooms with him. I watched his personality, his weirdness. I refused to ever appear with him. I think maybe one time it happened, and it was awful. The guy is not real, and what he is real crazy. So 734 votes, man. I mean, I challenge anybody out there to try to run for Congress. You don't need to raise 50,000. I've been doing congressional races since 2000. So I've never heard of a candidate getting 734 votes. So the translation of $50,000 into 734, that is almost a mathematical, it's either implausible, it's not impossible because he achieved it. But it's really interesting because he says that other people are obsessed with him, but all he does is talk about the people that he says are obsessed with him. So that's kind of a contrarian notion, right? A paradoxical term, circular logic, if you will. He certainly has an obsession with Ginger McQueen. And I'm not going to lie, Ginger McQueen is a superstar. She's probably one of the most underrated people on Twitter and Periscope, even though she gets twice the Periscope viewers that somebody like a Dilly does or me. Ginger McQueen is somebody that it just angers the hell out of people because she's articulate, she's smart, she's situated right outside of Chicago.
And
she doesn't
beautiful.
leave it. And beautiful. Yeah, exactly. But that bothers people. That bothers them a whole lot because she's just not allowed to be that way, right? And it's the same way his obsession with Brian Hussein, the treasurer for the PAC, essentially the leader of the PAC, who lives in Laguna Hills, drives a Maserati and Land Rovers and has jewelry stores and is worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, and beautiful wife, beautiful daughter, just an incredible guy that knows everybody, chats daily with those like Scott Adams and things like that, and talks to some of the biggest donors in California, and also knows people like Devin Nunes and Kevin McCarthy. So I mean, Dilly doesn't know any of those people. So I find it kind of funny that Dilly said that a member of the Trump family was upset for him questioning whether Q was real or not. I mean, this is the kind of shit where you got to draw the line if you're anybody that knows anything. It doesn't make any sense. Have I been with Eric Trump? Yes, I've been with Eric Trump on the campaign many times. He's a great guy. Have I been with Don Jr.? Yes, I have. He's an incredible guy. He's the nicest guy in the world. He is just his father's biggest asset. And no matter what Omarosa says, his father loves him. These people are not Q people, and they have no idea what it is. They don't care. Michael Flynn Jr. is a great guy. I've been around him many, 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 many times, and of course he had to put out a statement saying the same thing, because they're using his father's name in a way that to him it's in vain. And Michael Flynn had to say, listen, Q does not represent me or anything to do with our family. It's just not real. Move on with your lives. And they started attacking Michael Flynn Jr., who, frankly, I always got along with. I mean, Michael Flynn Jr. found a way to get through the middle of a lot of hairy shit. But the point is, I think I want to make before we get off it, we all know each other. All right? We all know each other. We've known each other since the campaign. And it's incredible to get to this point where, you have a Mike Cernovich, a Jack Posobiec, a Baked Alaska, or Cassandra Fairbanks and, Adam Gingrich. And, we all know each other. But then you get like this little figure to the side, like James Brower, who is going to be, obviously attached to this Q thing, who nobody paid attention to, is actually involved in something like this. And I've known this praying medic guy who is a total fraud and, has his own bankruptcy and spousal abuse issues. He's involved with the occult and is trying to attach like this ecclesiastical aspect to the Q drops. I mean, this guy's a total scumbag. I've known him for a year. He tried to rope me into all kinds of weird shit, writing books with him so we can sell to our followers. The guy, how small is the world, man? You know what I'm saying? Twitter is not real. I mean, it's not real. And there were only so many of us on the campaign because it was such an untraditional campaign. It was a non-traditional campaign. I'm in Pennsylvania. There were about 6 guys I know that were involved in the Trump campaign in the entire state of Pennsylvania. 6. And a couple of them do some lobbying for the administration, or back and forth, but there's nobody else left, dude. I'm in Harrisburg, PA, where I've worked, for 20 years, and nobody from the campaign. I mean, I'm kind of like a lone tiger walking down the street. So, it's just not real. None of it is real. And people have to get that through their heads, because real life is totally separate. In real life is where campaigns are won or lost. It's not Twitter. No one will win or lose a campaign based on Twitter, except for Donald Trump. No one. I mean, even unless you start posting pictures of yourself with little boys or dead girls or donkeys or, rabbits, if you're that sick, or upskirts at a nursing home, that kind of stuff you might lose in an election. But, Twitter, Facebook, as far as campaigns, they are just like auxiliary functions, supplemental to what you're supposed to be doing to get your messages out there. But please, it is not real. And if you intend to run for office as like Joy Villa, you're going to flame out spectacularly. And if you're a guy like Brendan Baby Chin Dilly, who thinks he's going to run on because he's got dilly drops where he's pulling in 5,000-6,000 people watching him on Twitter, or that he's on the Bill Mitchell show and there's 40,000 people because Bill Mitchell tweet texts his own shit every hour on the hour, 24 hours a day, you're not going to win anything. You're not a real person. You're not a real person to the district. Dilly wasn't in the district. He didn't live in that district. No one knew who the hell he was. You could spend $50,000 on billboards looking like a douchebag like you did. It's not going to work. All right. It's not going to, it's going to translate to 734 votes. Matter of fact, I ran for borough council. I talked about this today. I ran for borough council in Palmyra. It's a small little borough where I grew up, and less than 20,000 people. And I ran for borough council, and I had more than 734 votes in the primary. And that gives you an idea of which I think we had a total of maybe 3,000 people voting in there. And I had more than what he got in a congressional. And I spent $0. I knocked on 0 doors. All I had was my name and my community activity that I involved myself with as part of my whole portfolio of being somebody who cared about making things better. So forget about it, man. If you think you're going to achieve Twitter fame and make some money off of it, it's going to be a fleeting thing. And if you think you're going to bilk people out of money over Q and deciphering Q, then I'm afraid that the bell is tolling for thee, and we'll see here within the next couple of days. But in the back of my mind, I think I know better. In the back of my mind, I see people that have already, buried themselves up to the neck in this QAnon stuff, and it's going to be real hard to dig yourself out of a hole that you put yourself in to the neck up, or to the neck, and save yourself from the neck up. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think people are going to hold on to it like some kind of religious fervor. And it's a shame. And I really hope that it doesn't suppress, depress, or in any way harm our turnout in November.
All right, Adam. Well, thank you so much for clearing that up. That's quite a lot to say on the subject of Brendan and Q. But we are out of time here. Is there anything that you want to bring up before we end the stream here?
No, other than the fact that, I've been reticent, hesitant, not really thrilled to do anything self-promotion, that type of thing. I don't like it, especially now with all the stuff that I see. I agreed to do this because, frankly, Ash is a good guy, and Ginger McQueen introduced me to him, and she's an amazing person. And if you're going to get me to do something that I really don't typically do, it takes that type of connection to do it. And, of course, the interview that you did with Glenn was an eye-opener for me. And I really respect that you guys get everybody across the board. Some people that I would never be seen in an elevator with, and you guys give them a chance to do an AMA. And I really appreciate that, because you can't just selectively, be like Fox News from 8 to 11 and, put on what everybody wants to hear. So I appreciated that. And frankly, I thought I'd get on here and do this, but certainly this is not something that I like to put my face on anything and do this kind of stuff. But in this case, I will do it again. And then someday, really, I think you and bring Ash on together, and then you guys can do an AMA with Glenn and I both. And I'm sure that'll be like some kind of weird cyber fireworks.
That sounds like a fun time, Adam. I do want to thank you for being here. We did love having you. We love having Glenn, and we'd be more than willing to have both of you back or either of you back at any time. We loved you. Everybody listening, thank you. Thank you for submitting the questions, everybody. You have been listening to Right Now, the official podcast of New Right Network. If you like this broadcast, please follow us on Twitter. We're at New Right Network. Our guest today was Adam Gingrich. You can follow him at Gingrich of PA. That's Gingrich _of_PA. And Adam, once more, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you. Had a good time.